All right, thank you everybody for joining us today. We've got a great panel today. We're going to be talking about the intersection of healthcare and technology. And we've assembled a panel of leading experts from a wide variety of organizations that deal with the topic of connected health. And I think that we're going to have a great conversation about the opportunities, about some of the challenges, and some of the insights that each of these panelists have gained through their interaction with this new and growing field. So from left to right here we have Satya Parimi, who is the Group Vice President of Charter Communications, Barbara Selter, Vice President of Health Services for Maximus, Dr. Oren J. Mechanic, the Harvard Medical School and Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. And how does that fit on a business card, Oren? Is that yeah. And Steve Walsh, who is the president of the Massachusetts Health and Hospital Association. So welcome them, please. You guys have some fans out there, that's good. I'm Mark Siri, and I'm the Vice President for Strategic Development at Comcast. I'm based out of our headquarters in Philadelphia, and I work in our strategic development group, which is focused on creating value through innovative partnerships. For the last 3 years, the innovative partnerships we've been focusing on are with leading health organizations to explore how Comcast could more meaningfully contribute to advancement in the area of connected health. One of these efforts came to fruition this past April when we announced, along with Independence Blue Cross, the formation of a joint venture to focus on connected health and creating digital health platforms to help better connect providers, patients, and payers. So this announcement happened at the Health Evolution Summit in Laguna Beach, California, over a beautiful cliff. It was fantastic. But we had all these, it was packed with healthcare CEOs and luminaries from the healthcare industry. And after the announcement, the number one question I received was not, why is Comcast getting into healthcare, or even, what are you guys planning to do? The question I received most often was, what took you so long? So it seems that there's no shortage of imagination, ideas, and desire to leverage the technology that the cable industry can bring to bear in order to help create better connections between consumers, between providers, between healthcare resources across the board. So what struck me through this whole journey was that people don't really they're not excited about the technology itself. What they're excited about is what they can accomplish, what mission they can undertake with this technology, and they're really looking to the industry to help them accomplish their missions. So with that, I'm going to start by asking Dr. Mechanic, Oren, what's your mission at Harvard Medical School? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And how does the technology either help you accomplish that, get in your way, or where do we need to go to help you accomplish that mission?
Great, wonderful. Thank you for having me, Mark, and welcome everyone. So I represent Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and in that we work closely with Harvard Medical School, and we're on faculty there, and we have all these conversations weekly, bi-weekly, to discuss how can we improve patient care. And we've had these conversations, I'm sure, for decades on end, and it's really become a point right now as to how do we provide healthcare outside of the four walls of our hospital. How do we reach out to populations that may not have access to a physician within 20 miles, 10 miles? How do we actually care for a patient that doesn't necessarily have to come in to a tertiary healthcare center? So when we sit in these meetings, most of the conversations are really surrounded on broadband. How do we reach folks that may not have access to such high definition cable telecommunications capabilities, and really how do we assist them in our mission of bettering their lives? We have about 200,000 people, patients that are in our risk-based, is how we call it, our accountable care organization at our hospital.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
you're part of an ACO then?
We're part of an ACO, and many hospitals are part of some sort of ACO, whether they're caring for other patients or their own employees. our goal is to better their health outcomes. And so by doing that while minimizing costs, and that is the cost of travel, the cost of time for the physician, the nurse, actually seeing the patient in their clinic and keeping it outside of the hospital would be beneficial to the ACO, to payers, and ultimately to patients as well, which is our ultimate mission.
And that's a little bit of a flip, because in the old days, the idea was build as many hospital beds as you could, and then pack them full of people and keep them there to keep charging them. And so now this is a little bit of a change in attitude around that.
Absolutely. We're trying to really redefine what healthcare means to overall, a healthy population. If you're sick and you have you need to seek emergent care or some expertise care, by all means, we want you in the hospital. But we have things like nosocomial infections that you actually get by being in the hospital that we're trying to limit. And we get dinged when someone gets readmitted to the hospital from Medicare. And so we are a vested interest in this as much as patients, really.
Now, you just mentioned an interesting word that I think we're going to be coming back to a lot, and that is populations.
Right.
And one of the things I learned is that the medical world's term population is very similar to the media world's term audiences. And there is a wide diversity of populations and audiences out there. Barbara, there's a particular population that you're interested in and focused on that might actually have a slightly different attitude towards and facility with technology than if you look at the general population as a whole. Do you want to talk about that population and what sorts of technologies and techniques and approaches you're using to help serve that population?
Sure. I focus in my work on the long-term care population, the elderly and people with disabilities who, to a very large extent, are in their homes. And one of the things we are trying to do, Medicaid programs across the country are really focused on helping the elderly remain in their homes, age in place. One of the things that has been really helpful in improving the outcomes and health care of this population is really using remote monitoring technology. But interestingly, one of the things we have found is that just putting remote monitors in a senior's home is not very effective, not surprising. There's a lot of resistance. There's,
people
fear
don't
of,
like 24/7 surveillance? That's strange.
Right.
Hold on, newsflash. Yeah, that's amazing.
But what's interesting is when you introduce the technology and include a kind of social component to it. So for example, we have remote monitoring platforms that have the ability for seniors to communicate with each other through secure teleconferencing. We put music and games and things of that sort on the platform to really engage the seniors. And that's an area where I think the cable companies in particular could really play a huge role. This linkage between the actual delivery of healthcare information, education, and also addressing the issues of social isolation and addressing the issues of entertainment, combining those two in a way that really encourages this audience to participate in the use of this technology.
We did a lot of focus groups with caregivers of older populations, and one of them said that their mother watches 8 to 10 hours of QVC a day because they feel like the people are talking to them and keeping them company. And they asked, could we put health-like positive messages into the QVC stuff so that we could reach them that way? And so, yeah, I think that's very insightful.
It's very interesting. There was a recent study done by AARP and Stanford University showing that the cost to the Medicare program of social isolation was $6.7 billion a year.
Holy moly.
So there is a tremendous linkage between really making healthcare much more effective and being able to use this technology to address some of these more social issues that are really driving a lot of the healthcare costs.
Well, thank you, Barbara. Satya, at Charter, you guys have, and your teams have done quite a bit of work and exploration with leading healthcare institutions on exactly the types of topics that Barbara was talking about. Can you share with us some of the insights around not only the technology, but all of the operational issues around it, the opportunities that you've uncovered, and maybe some of the barriers in terms of helping this to become a full-blown business activity that cable companies lean into?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Before I go into some of the experiences, let me talk about how we think about telehealth and connected health. We look at it in three key buckets. The first bucket is business-to-business services. We offer hospitals, healthcare systems to connect between various facilities and to their partners. So a lot of that is fiber connectivity, high capacity. A lot of it, we've seen great success there because hospitals with digitization require to move large amounts of data securely. And that's where we're just selling as a business to another business. It's connectivity, which enables telehealth and connected health on top. The second area of focus for us, which we've done a lot of activity in, is what we call business to consumer. So this is telehealth services we offer to businesses so they can deliver a service to the end patient. A lot of this involves virtual visits, remote patient monitoring, where we don't engage with the patient directly. We provide the infrastructure for a lot of the healthcare providers to deliver a telehealth service.
So you're an enabler for
that's right.
someone else's mission.
Yeah, and we had two major trials there, one in Maine with a large physician practice there. We started with using WebEx. So we said, let's make it simple. It's all computer-based. Technology-wise, trial was successful. We had some very interesting learnings on sometimes you need to figure out how to get your laptop to work, especially when you speak and also listen.
I think every single person in this room has done the 15 minutes of WebEx struggle dance at the beginning of a meeting. Like, can you hear me? Are you on mute? Wait, are you seeing my screen? Oh, wait, I'm seeing your screen. Okay, sorry.
Or they needed help for someone to come and set it up. There was concerns with scheduling issues. So it was great learnings. We worked through it. The doctors were really happy with the results. We got some great learnings, especially around seeing patients in their home environment, talking to patients with caregivers with them. So you ask the patient, like, have you been taking medications? They always say yes.
Yep.
But then you ask the mom or the daughter sitting next to them, and they say no, they're not. Or you see like a cigarette butt in the back somewhere, you know. So clinically, doctors liked it. We wanted to move forward into commercializing this as a service we could offer, and that's where we ran into reimbursement challenges.
Yeah.
And I think that we'll talk about this as we go down. So there's cost involved with setting this up. There's cost involved with running it on a monthly basis. But there has to be some form of reimbursement, primarily for the service providers, the healthcare providers, because then the money trickles down to all the people that support them. So based on the learnings, we decided to do a version 2 of this, and we said, let's simplify things. Let's focus on not new revenue. Let's look at cost reduction. A large hospital system having a lot of readmissions post-op. They want to take care of patients externally in their homes and make sure they keep them there and don't get readmission back.
Sort of what Oren was talking
That's
about.
right, exactly.
Getting dinged on Medicare reimbursement if you're
That's
admitted
right.
within 30 days.
So maybe the business model is cost savings,
Yeah.
right? So we said, okay, no WebEx this time. We decided to put a camera in the homes connected to people's TVs. Everybody has a TV. So from the technology perspective, we learned it works much better. We had a scheduling portal where you can doctors can set up the meetings. But again, great learnings operationally. Turns out it's hard to get a hold of patients after they leave the hospital because they're doing repeat visits, follow-ups after that. So whenever you call, you can't get a hold of them to schedule the meeting, to schedule the install. Mm-hmm. So we had to change our processes to say call them different days of the week at different times of day, right? I mean, the cable model is you call them at specific time of day, and if they're having follow-up therapy or whatever, they're not at home. So interesting thing. And also the biggest learnings, this is funny, is the hardest part is not the install, it's getting the lighting right.
Yeah,
Because
I would
most
imagine.
people's TVs face windows with bad light sources. Either it's too dark or it's too bright. So we worked through it. It was great learning. Again, this was with a large healthcare system in Ohio. We got that to work. Technology, scheduling, operations. Again, the challenge here again was reimbursement. The cost savings were there, but to do it at scale, there has to be some big investment up front, and either that requires an insurance company or some payer to step in and say, we're willing to put in money into this infrastructure to do it. So we ended up not taking it to a commercial model. We continue offering connectivity services for the hospital system, but
Because there's a proven model there. People
Yes.
pay for that service.
That's right. Technology works, operations work. If there is reimbursement, this can go to scale. Right? So the last area is what we could do, what we call B2C or business to consumer, especially long-term care, aging in place, where again, we're trying to solve for the payer problem here again, right? Maybe we go directly to the consumer, and typically caregiver happens to be in the US, the oldest daughter in the family. Maybe we can reach out to them and say, what if we can help elderly age in place by doing a whole bunch of monitoring and sensors, both passive sensors and active sensors. That's something we've done a lot of surveys, a lot of work on. We've done a lot of work in partnership with Comcast on some of these surveys as well. There is a model there. We're still trying to figure out what's the best way to commercialize and what the right price points are, because I think Barbara mentioned this in our prep call, there is upfront investment, right? You need to put some of these sensors out there, right? So there is an upfront cost. If we have some form of guarantee that people will be on it for, let's say, 2 years, 3 years, we are willing to incur that cost, but there is no guarantee there. So that's an area we're looking at.
You need to see a long-term return on that investment.
That's right.
So I think that one of the problems will be solved, because when the current millennial generation becomes aged, they'll just be posting what they're doing on Instagram.
That's right.
And so, their grandkids will just look it up on the phone and go, okay, grandma's well, whatever, she's cool. So anyhow, Satya, you mentioned that there were reimbursement issues. Yes. And as we know, some of the fastest growing segments of healthcare costs are public healthcare costs, Medicare, Medicaid. So Steve, this is probably an area, as in your position, where you get a lot of different ideas, different attitudes, different needs, and different expressions of how people think they're going to be leveraging the technology and dealing with some of the issues that Satya, Barbara, and Oren have brought up. What's your thoughts? What have you heard from your members, and what sorts of commonalities have emerged? And is there any opportunity for collaboration on an industry or regional level that can solve some of these things?
Yeah, thanks. Good question. We talk a lot about what the future of healthcare is going to look like, and Oren mentioned this a little bit. It's not in a hospital. Right, so I run a hospital association, and our work is to actually try to put ourselves out of business in some way. And half our membership understands that, and they're trying to evolve, and the other half is Kodak and Polaroid and Blockbuster Video, right? There's 2 left in the world, and they're in Alaska.
One.
Is it one? One?
Yeah,
okay.
I saw that on Reddit today, Bend, Oregon.
But it's also a consumer challenge, right? So if government were to begin to pay, that would be big, but commercial insurers kind of get away with operating in a 20-year-old healthcare system as we have evolved. No one in this room likes to go to the doctor. Everybody in this room will agree that healthcare is more expensive. And everybody has now access to their phone. You can go home right now, turn your television on, watch something, order Uber Eats, see who's calling on your home phone because it comes up on your screen, do just about everything from that screen, but you can't talk to your doctor. And it takes about, what is it, Oren, you correct me, but an hour and 21 minutes on average for a doctor's appointment. Nobody in this room has enough time in their day either. It's an average of 20 minutes for telemedicine. So why aren't we all screaming about this, right? What you have done already, and thank you for this, is put us in a position to be able to succeed because the companies that are represented in this room have made connectivity a priority. And so there are places in Massachusetts now, the hospitals that I represent, that didn't have the ability to even try to do this 5 years ago, a decade ago. And now they are all in a position, thanks to all of you. But we have not held insurance companies' feet to the fire as to what they are willing to reimburse in what could absolutely save the system money, save you time, and make us healthier. It was referenced earlier, but one of the worst places to be if you're sick is in a hospital. Get out of there as fast as you can and get home and get healthy and be able to connect with your doctor on a regular basis or your medical provider. With us not doing this ourselves and owning this, we are allowing other people, other innovators to come into the market and do it in various ways. And it's going to be then more difficult because they're not connected to your electronic medical record. They're not your primary care provider. They don't know necessarily where to tell you to go in the case of emergency. They're triaging, treating you in the moment, and then they're forgetting about you. Set it and forget it, and they don't think about you again. And that's why this has to be done by those that are on the stage here today and others to make sure that the patient is in the center of this so that you get healthier as a result. And then the intended consequences of that are going to be more of a value-based healthcare system, more time for you to be able to do the things that you want to do and not spend them in traffic going to a doctor's appointment, and making sure your family and your loved ones are healthier and can get real time, real access to healthcare when you need it.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point with the consumerization of all these things that were primarily in the past the province of a professional. There used to be such a thing as a taxi dispatcher. Now you're your own taxi dispatcher. So I actually have a question for the audience. How many people here regularly use a ride-sharing service like Lyft or Uber and call it from their phone? Okay, good amount. How many people here regularly use a telemedicine service on your phone to have a conversation with a physician? Anybody? Okay, one person in the back. So the technology is, in terms of penetration to consumers, is there. It's just, as Steve mentioned, attitudes on the part of roughly 50% of your members, and the legislative and financial landscape is lagging. So to that end, Oren, you mentioned that your organization had been leveraging some consumer-style connectivity to segment out, as you said earlier, the folks who really need to be in the hospital and the folks who maybe can take care of stuff on their own with some technology that's lower cost and easier to access. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Of course. So I want to instill a passion in everyone that ultimately making a patient better actually saves costs. And that is our mission, that is my personal mission. If you make someone healthier, you can prevent an expensive admission. You can actually prevent any complications. You can put them in the workforce and they can continue to work and not have any missed days.
Yeah, productivity is big.
Yeah, you make them happier, and then you oftentimes make them healthier as well. And that is, as we see with this issue of parity, which is reimbursement to hospitals, we see that as the biggest opportunity. So what we're introducing actually is an employee-based and community-based outreach where you can access a doctor at any time at Beth Israel. And we're still working this out because right now with parity and the barriers to that of actually getting paid for this service is tough. But if we envision that we have a remote patient monitoring device, so if we can monitor someone's finger stick and glucose from their home, we don't have them to have them come in. We make them healthier. There's so much global payment models out there that we can leverage. So the Affordable Care Act actually introduced accountable care organizations, and that's just a fancy word that you get a lump sum for your disease state, and it's my job as a physician to make them healthier. And we get rewarded as a healthcare system, the patient gets rewarded, and ultimately our nation becomes healthier. We see this so often, the WHO rankings of where we stand compared to everywhere else. We're in the 30s, and yet we spend the most on healthcare. So why don't we actually spend that money or even leverage what we already have, which is telecommunications capabilities, and actually just make our population better?
Yeah, that sounds more like redistributing the attention to where you're trying to keep people healthy, keep them out of the hospital versus waiting till they fall off that cliff and then throwing gobs of money at them to bring them back. I'm sensing a theme across all four of you, which is that there's opportunity, but payment needs to be solved, and there's also the open question of the initial investment to get over the hump, whether it's to develop a technology solution that's easier to use or whether it's to widely distribute these technologies. Barbara, what are your thoughts, given some of the agencies you deal with at Maximus, on public-private partnerships that maybe can help get us over that investment hurdle?
Well, one of the things that I find very, very frustrating on the public side, I visit with Medicaid directors all over the country, and we talk a lot about the use of technology and being able to address the issues of the elderly population. This population is going to double by 2030. And all of these Medicaid directors who pay for long-term care services are really concerned because the programs are just not sustainable. And I often talk to them about how using this technology can really reduce their costs. Whether it's not paying for institutional care or delaying institutional care for a much longer period of time, whether it's through reductions in hospital readmissions, healthier population, all of those things. One thing that is a huge cost to the Medicaid population, to the Medicaid programs, are the costs for home care workers. Direct care workers who provide assistance in the home. And this technology would allow home care workers to be much better utilized, to be able to scarce resources that can be better shared. So when you talk to these Medicaid directors, they all say, I totally understand what the savings are. I have no doubt, we've seen studies, we all agree. The problem that I have is that I don't have money up front to make the investment. And I think we all agree that that is really the key issue. So one of the things that I'd like to see is a way of creating public-private partnerships, whether with the telecommunications companies, whether with the healthcare delivery systems, or even a government program where we can get some upfront investment and then be able to pay back over time once the savings are created.
Yeah, I've heard some of the leadership of a local care management organization in Philadelphia say that they both celebrate and groan when they get a large contract because the reimbursement often lags sometimes 12 to 18 months. And I know that in a commercial entity like ours, if I submitted a business plan that said, we'll invest all this money and our customers won't deliver the first payment until 2 years from now, that's going to be a tough sell. So Satya, have you, in your explorations around the commercial side of this, have you connected at all with the government affairs folks at Charter and talked about how in delivering services, as you said, in a B2B fashion, perhaps also there's some sort of spillover or opportunity to help solve some of the problems on a regional level that Barbara's talking about?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mark. Yes, we have had a number of conversations both at the federal level and also at the state level. We are continuing to see progress being made, primarily through enabling of reimbursement for telemedicine at the state level, right? For a number of states, there's a lot of stuff going on there. At the federal level, we've tried to influence a lot of bills that were being worked on, but actually nothing came to fruition there. We continue to work on it. But rather than wait, we're trying to see if we can find populations of patients where the payer is not going to change.
Yeah.
Right? The upfront investment for businesses like ours is not a problem. I mean, we're a cable company. We spend billions of dollars in infrastructure, but we know we can monetize it over the next 10 years, right? And that's spending money up front is not an issue for us. What we need is some line of sight on certain patient populations where the payer is not going to change. Because the challenge has been some level of comfort that will get paid over 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Because the initial investment range anywhere from $800, $900 to maybe $3,000 or $4,000 based on how basic or complex you want to get from multimedia equipment to sensors in the home all the way through up front. So we've been trying to work with various payers to see where it's possible, be it self-insured companies, larger companies that are more open to doing this. We've talked a lot with the VA. VA is one of the leading telehealth providers and drivers of the technology because, as you're aware, it's a captive population. I mean, with the VA, we're trying to do with the states. There's certain patient populations that don't change. And as Oren mentioned, there's some capitation models, ACO models, where maybe not version 1, version 2, version 3 of those, where there's some line of sight and comfort factor. That's where we're trying to see. I mean, we are open to investing in this because we are in the communities. We provide a lot of the basic infrastructure to enable us, everything from connectivity to operations, to get this installed, fix things if something's broken. We can 24/7 monitor a lot of these remote devices. So it's an ongoing process right now. We do a lot of trials, but there's only so many trials you can run, right? I think we've kind of proven out technology works. Yeah, I'm completely trialed out. I can't take a business case, like you said, internally on another trial or a grant-based program because technology, operations, clinical benefits are all proven right now.
Yeah.
The key is we're trying to find a partner that's willing to co-risk with us, and we're willing to move ahead to do a lot of the commercialization.
That's an interesting business model shift for a telecommunications company to go at risk for cost savings.
Yeah.
That might be an interesting next evolution for organizations like ours. Yeah. Steve, speaking of evolutions and speaking of perhaps opportunities for the types of industries in this room, you mentioned that some portion of your membership is completely rethinking how they're going to be delivering care. So what types of technology shifts and dependencies is that going to drive as they plan out their care delivery in a region? Are they going to be shifting more towards investment in digital infrastructure, in high-speed connectivity? What sorts of opportunities can people in this room and at this conference start to think about as that shift happens in your business?
So our next generation business model is going to be to get in the car, as simple as get in the car and drive to your house. That's just what healthcare is going to be. We're going to go back to the days where the doctor used to visit.
Wow.
That has to be where this goes. When you think about, there's a theme, and the theme is often about reimbursement, and I don't necessarily love that. Right? Because it isn't really about what we're paid. You've never been to a healthcare panel where they haven't talked about how much they're paid or reimbursed, and that's exhausting in many ways as an audience. There's plenty of money. There's $66 billion in the Massachusetts healthcare economy. It's how we use it. So this idea about the upfront investment in a patient is what we all ought to be thinking about. I have a longer contract with my cable company, one of you in this room, than I do with my healthcare provider. So I've prioritized my ability to get HBO for $24.99 for 2 years more than I have my ability to see my doctor on a regular basis. And when you think about the insurance model, I don't mean to just kick the crap out of insurance companies, although I'm happy to do that all day, every day. But the reality is this. We have created a model for them where, because of open enrollment, and you all have prioritized choice over health. So because you get to choose every year what company is going to invest in you in perpetuity and be able to amortize over your life and be able to invest in you being healthy. So we have a sick system, right? We reward you for being sick. We all get rewarded when you are sick. We have never flipped that on our head. You look at other countries, they reward you for being healthy. That's why we're 30th. Germany does a better job. You might have to wait 3 weeks for an MRI. Nobody in this room would accept that, right? People would be calling me saying, can you get me into his hospital to get an MRI this afternoon? Scotland pays you, they give you a tax credit if you have a low BMI. I wouldn't get it. but I might invest in myself if I knew that I was going to get it next year, and maybe think about things differently than we do. So when you say what technology, certainly it's telemedicine, no doubt. The other thing that really will have an impact, I believe, and our members think, is mobile integrated healthcare. This idea that you will be able to call the emergency department, right? The laws in Massachusetts, thanks to our lawmakers, and Representative Golden is here, they were the first, and then we've lagged a little bit behind, to change the laws so when you call 911, you don't have to be transported to a hospital. So if a third of the people in the emergency department don't need to be there, why can't we just call, and if we don't think it's emergent, we'll just send someone to you? Because Barbara's population sometimes just wants to talk to someone, and they don't necessarily need to go to the emergency department. So we call up, we'll figure out what's going on, maybe there's a telemedicine approach to it, and then we'll dispatch a mobile integrated healthcare team, maybe an NP, maybe a PA, maybe it's an EMS truck, to your home. And we'll talk to you there, and we'll see, and then we'll set up a follow-up appointment, and hopefully the insurance will have caught up so that we now are able to invest in you,
That's right.
so that we can have you for a period of time. And that's where ACOs could be a remarkable next step for this, because if providers are able to be part of that insurance product, if they're able to create that and have upside and downside risk in that product, then you're going to see the hospitals want to do that. They're going to want, it's not that they don't want to do that for you today, they want to, it's just that 14 out of the 63 acute care hospitals in Massachusetts have a negative operating margin. So they can't do it until they figure out how to make sure that they're able to thrive and survive so that they can make you healthier.
Yeah, you know, your note about the inverted priorities reminds me of some of the trials we did where we were delivering content and technology into the home. And I was doing a ride along with one of these, and the young woman had missed her renal ultrasound because of mobility. Barbara, you were talking about. She couldn't get across town to her renal ultrasound appointment. And then while I was talking, I noticed she was wearing a Jerry Springer t-shirt. And this is in Philadelphia. And I said, "Oh, you're a fan of Jerry Springer?" And she said, "Oh yeah, I've been up to see the show twice." The show was filmed in Stamford, Connecticut. So she could make it 125 miles to Stamford to see Jerry Springer, but she literally could not get across town to save her life with this renal ultrasound. So it really speaks to people's priorities and what they'll go through and what we need to do to reach out to them. Oren, what sort of engagement strategies and inducements have you been using at your institution to try to get people to be more engaged, as Steve, and more sort of more self-directed, as Steve was talking about?
Exactly. So that's a great point that you make, and we see that often. So I work in the innovation wing, and I love that it's under the umbrella of innovation, because everything that we do doesn't necessarily have to be telemedicine. It could be mobile health units, like Steve mentioned. We really strive to speak with startups, with different healthcare companies out there. There are people who have ingenious products out there, and really it's our ability as a large healthcare system, as a physician, as part of a community, to take that technology and put it out there. And so what we do is we really try to find the populations that have some of that motivation to show not only that it improves the population, remember, that is our ultimate goal, make them healthier, and then secondary outcomes are getting some sort of ROI, some return on investment for that, and have a proof of concept. So, for example, just last week, an Israeli company reached out, and they have this really neat monitor that you wear throughout your whole pregnancy. And on your television, you could see exactly the fetal heart tones. You could see whatever contractions may be. You can really monitor yourself throughout all of pregnancy. And right then and there, you're motivated to care for yourself. You're motivated to track any changes in your body. You're not necessarily just coming for a spot ultrasound at the OBGYN, where again, you pay for park and you're driving and you don't really know what it means when you see those waveforms on the screen. You're bought into your own health. And so we are interested in those kind of companies. We're interested in those kind of endeavors that really leverage your own personal desire to be just better and healthier. And hopefully that carries on to the rest of the population as well.
And the entire panel, you've all been talking about this move into the home, or where the consumer is, or the patient from the clinical side. Barbara, what does this say about the burden for companies like ours to ensure that the technical infrastructure in the home, Satya was talking about the B2B infrastructure, but it seems like now the home is going to be much more of a focus, and we'll have more devices connected to the wireless. We'll have more types of data and more critical data, which needs to move and needs to be protected. Do you have any thoughts about what this means for home care workers?
Yeah, I really believe that this will be a very significant thing, particularly in delivering care in rural areas. I was working on setting up a remote monitoring pilot for seniors in a frontier town in the mountains of Northern California. And one of the barriers, quite frankly, was that it was really tough to get connectivity in those areas. So I think there really needs to be an emphasis on getting reliable connectivity. But I also see that the movement to value-based care in medicine is really, I think, going to be a solution in terms of this whole issue of being able to deal with the upfront, being able to engage consumers. As more and more health systems move to value-based purchasing, there are going to be real incentives to make sure that connectivity is there and to make sure that these kinds of technologies are used more readily, more effectively.
Thank you. As we get to the closing minutes excuse me, of the panel, I want to make sure that if anyone has any thoughts or questions or ideas that they'd like to share with the panel, that they have an opportunity. So is there a microphone that we can float around? Okay, this young man has a microphone. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to ask about or contribute at this time? Okay, great. Then perhaps we can share a few more thoughts, and if anything pops to mind, just raise your hand and I'll keep an eye out. So Satya, starting with you, if there was one innovation or disruption that you could immediately deploy at scale, wave a magic wand and forget all these issues about reimbursement or legislation, that you think that the cable industry could deploy that would make a difference in the stories you've heard today, what would be your top one?
My top one would be a kit you can buy that is FDA approved, right? That's below $1,000. You can get it from Amazon, Home Depot, Walmart, Target, whatever, that you can take home and it self-installs. That would be a massive game changer because it takes care of the upfront cost stuff. It gets you, it's easy to deploy, right? It's everywhere. And then I think that once that first barrier drops, people can then offer service on top of that a lot more easier. I think that big barrier, the FDA one, I bring it up because that's one of the other challenges we don't really talk about a lot. Telemedicine is great. You can do video conferencing pretty straightforward, but once you start doing monitoring of patients remotely, there's a lot of regulations around certification of devices, what do you do with the data, who sees the data, privacy issues, security issues, which are all very critical. But again, we went through this. We spent a lot of money to get platforms through FDA approval for gathering information, running AI and analytics on it, and then presenting the information. There's a lot of regulations around that. So if I can solve for that, I think that will completely upend the market because now, you've kind of gotten the infrastructure, gotten over security regulatory issues, and then it's basically a story about who's willing to do what on a monthly basis for what cost.
So a hospital in a box.
Yes, or at least a doctor's office room in a box.
Yeah,
right?
Exam room in a box.
Exam room in a box.
Yeah, let's flip it a little bit. Imagine if you brought home your television, you took it out of the box, and then you had to contact every television station individually
to sign up
to have them install their channel on your TV. That our industry wouldn't be where it is today. So aggregation and that streamlining of the customer experience, both on a financial side, you pay one cable bill and you have access to thousands of channels, has really allowed this industry to thrive. Perhaps that sort of thinking has to or can be applied to other industries. Barbara, how about yourself? What's the one thing that you'd love to widely distribute and could be an opportunity for us in the cable industry to investigate?
Well, I think one of the things that is important is to wrap this technology in services to help people really make the best of it. So, for example, being able to take a device like that and then connect it up to a call center, such that people in their home alone are continuously being monitored, have some place to call if there's some problem. Caretakers have some place to call where they can get quick support. Cable companies providing content to really train family caregivers to make them more efficient. So taking that, at-home package and marrying it with the services that really help people make use of this in a more productive way.
So there might be some opportunities for us to either partner or deliver some
Exactly.
of those services
Yep,
ourselves.
yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. Oren, how about yourself? Given your view on innovation and your purview, what would you like to bring to life?
Yeah, and there's so much out there. I will follow up on the two comments made. These devices are out there. They're inexpensive. We just need to bring this all together and somehow deliver it to the patient. So in another project and pitch that we were working on is we have a little device. It's about, I don't know, a baseball sized, and it has a little edge that just sticks out. And what you could do is you could actually put it in your ear, and you can actually see the tympanic membrane. You can put it in your mouth, see the posterior throat. You can actually put it on your heart and record your telemetry, so your actual waveform of your heart. Now, this may seem like a great device that we may be able to bring it out and have urgent kind of appointments, somehow streamline it into our medical record. Whenever anybody takes a picture, it captures it. But this can go so much further.
Yeah.
So patients with atrial fibrillation who may have an abnormal heart rate, you can capture when it's too high, when it's dangerously high, when it's so high that we're actually concerned about a stroke, and that's why this is so important, this physiology. And so right then and there, you have a device at home that can be in the cable company's box that I just heard a pitch for $200, FDA approved, one device, and we can actually make it happen, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, and then perhaps the infrastructure that we all have around managing devices and data in the home can plug into something like that and help enable wide distribution. Steve, how about yourself? You've had some strong thoughts today. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Yeah,
on this
hopefully it's
topic.
not recorded. I have no board members here. Or I'm sending my resume out this afternoon. Listen, I say keep doing what you're doing. I think you have helped our industry in incredible ways, and almost by accident, because it was in your best interest. But it's in all of our best interests now to work together to get to the next level, right? And that's, imagine what we could do together if we put the hospitals and the health systems in your boardrooms and we talked about how can we reach people? Because hospitals are really just a communication company. You're a communication company. If we did it together and we communicated directly with patients, right? Some of the stuff freaks you out a little bit. You think about it, you go, well, the doc and the TV, like I don't want it to be in the middle of the procedure to be buffering, and then you get the pinwheel of death, which is literally be a pinwheel of death at that point. But so we can get better at what we're doing, and the fetal heart monitor, like there's 3 types of people, right? One will never look at it. One will look at it occasionally, use it the right way, call the doctor, and one will sit in front of the TV the entire time. Like my wife would sit in front of the TV and watch it for 9 months. So we have to think about how we're going to use the technology. But see, I think that's a conversation that's best had together. Yes. Because it would be incredible if we put our considerable resources with your considerable resources and said, how can we do good and do well, both for your industry, but ultimately for our patients?
Yeah.
Yeah, we at a lot of the conversations we had at Comcast, we've talked about how the media industry is the largest behavior modification tool in the country. Typically, the behavior we're modifying is what dishwasher detergent you're going to buy or what movie you're going to watch this weekend. But if we could use our powers for good, then perhaps we can help to bend some of these cost curves and, like Oren and Barbara and everyone has said, improve people's lives. And so I think that's what I'll close with. We should not forget the potential and the power we have as an industry to help enable the ideas and the missions and thoughts of these brilliant people, and to help reach people in their homes or wherever they are and give them the access to the tools, the technology, and more importantly, the information or the connection, Barbara, like you were saying, that social connection that can help them make a dramatic difference in their lives. And so with that, I want to thank the panel. Thank you for your time today, and thank you, audience, for being here.